Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the podcast that shares ideas on how to upgrade your lead generation. Here is your host, Glenn Schmeltzley.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today's talk explores what's possible with data. But first, I want to ask you for one thing as you hear this episode. Can you please give me your feedback, even if just to let me know that you listened? You can reply to a tweet, comment on a post on Instagram, or chime in on a LinkedIn post. Whatever way you're comfortable, it means a lot to me to know that you're giving the show your time. On to today's show. In its raw form, data is not worth much, but if refined and put together with other data, it can be worth a lot. There are two pieces of technology that make this fairly easy today. First, APIs let you collect and organize the data, whether it's first party or third party. And second, visualization tools bring the data to life, helping people get insights out of it and make decisions. And then, should you put a unique transformational twist on it, it can become an application that monetizes the data. Glassdoor, Nest, Zapier, Mint, Robinhood, Flipboard, Ancestry, and a favorite of mine, GoodReads, all built tremendous market value by creating a useful visual experience out of data that was just lying around. And a person who's going to help us see what's possible in this has quite the story. And he's still a fairly young guy. At age 16, he became curious about the game of poker. That began not only his play of it, but he was able to make decisions based on the statistics that he loved so much. And that eventually brought him a 15-year career as a professional poker player. At the end of this time, wanting to give others the benefit of using numbers to make decisions, he founded Systematik, a data consulting company, which helps businesses untangle, collect, visualize, and understand their data. He holds a degree in mathematics from the University du Quebec à Montreal, and that's where he joins us from today. Please welcome Eric Boissonneault. I'm glad to welcome Eric Boissonneault. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Hey, Glenn. Thank you for having me. And it's been a while. I've been trying to have another chat with you, so I'm glad that we're here now.
That's right. Can you tell people the company that you founded?
I founded Systematik with a K.ca 2 years, a bit more than 2 years ago. It started off as a marketing agency, but so I was doing a bit of everything. And then I started doing some data work, mostly tracking, so Google Tag Manager, GA, Google Analytics, and really enjoyed it much more than running ads and the creative part of marketing. I do have a poker background. I was playing poker for a living for 15 years. So focusing on the numbers and statistics made just much more sense to me.
Yes.
And I had enough requests from my current client to be able to pivot without losing my customer base. So I stayed alive for a while, and then it grew up.
That's great.
While focusing just on the data. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of the tools and some of the approaches that you use. But first, let's kind of deal with that pivot, and let's deal with kind of what you helped some customers realize, or maybe where they were going and what they helped you realize. It sounds like you had a little bit of a light bulb moment when it comes to the value that exists inside of data, right? And data is something, when you're on the web, it is just spewed out of everything that we do, right? The talking that we're doing right now, there's data being collected on it. And a lot of us just think of this as, it's residual and sometimes it's garbage. But you looked at it and said, no, there's actually some important value here. And maybe that value could even be more greatly recognized. So, maybe just tell me, in terms of how you did it with your clients, where did you start showing them that their data has value?
Well, at first I was really shocked because since I played poker for a long time, I did not add any experience in the business world. And for me, tracking data was always part of how I make a living playing poker. Like when you play poker, you track everything, because I was playing online. So I was tracking every hands that I would be playing, look at my results, make better decision, improve. And when I got to the business world, I assumed that it would be basically the same thing, that like when you're a professional, you know all your numbers.
Right.
And you have complete clarity on what happened and how you should react to that and plan for it and even forecast. But what I realized is that at least my clients had no confidence in their data whatsoever. They were always kind of relying on intuition and making most of the time just bad decisions based on that. So at first I focused on getting them accurate data, which was the first part. But I quickly realized that the real value came when I helped them understand what this data meant and how to really act on it. Because we've been hearing like data driven, it's so important for the past, 10 years, 10, 15 years. Maybe I remember just seeing that in random discussion online.
Yes.
And it seems that we still haven't bridged that gap. It's easier now to collect data, but we still are kind of starved for actual real information, real insights from that data.
Yes. So they must have been using some data, or there was at least passive data that was existing. So would I be right that when you were asking them about what they are using their data for, they might say, well, I log into Google Analytics and I go down 3 levels deep in the menu and I look at one number once a month and then I close it. Is that kind of where they were?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, they would look at page views and opt-ins, like their most important conversion. Sometimes even that was not accurate, but
sure, okay.
Even when it is, I mean, this was one-sided. We really noticed that the value came when we started mixing that data, blending that data with other systems that they were using.
All right. And I want to get to that. Let's first, though, understand how you approach data. It sounds like one of the hurdles that you had to get your clients over is that data is not a number that is sitting on a UI that you have to go into. You should be able to bring the data to you. And I know you're a big fan of using, sources that we have, in our own, let's say, cloud instance or in our own maybe Google account. Where do you like to see the data? To you, does it even count if it's like way off in some application that you have to log into?
Not really. What I found is if you make it just a little bit complicated, they won't be taking a look at it. So we normally display the data in only one place in Google Data Studio most of the time.
Sure.
Which is a data visualization tools. And it's great. I mean, it's free, and it really, you can divide in pages and they can look at their marketing data, sales data, or even all the data blended together to have an overview of the business.
So Data Studio, just for those who haven't, kind of wrap their head around it. So you're not suggesting that Data Studio knows different things. It by itself only handles the visualization, right? So it's not a database.
No, it's not. It can do some transformation. You can run some calculation inside the tool, but the main application for it is really to connect different tools to it and visualize that in a way that makes sense to a business owner and not a data scientist, for example.
Right. Okay. So Data Studio makes the product basically begins with asking you what sources of data do you want to connect to, right? Give us some examples of how you can connect to Data Studio and maybe what the easiest, like what would the very first data source that someone should connect it to be?
Yeah, well, a great way to start, I mean, and that's how I started with Data Studio, is that they had all those different Google Sheets laying around with sales data, with like CRM data or like outreach data, and it was all spread in different places. And since Google Data Studio is part of the Google ecosystem, you have natively the possibility to connect to other Google tools like Google Sheets, Google Ads, Google Analytics. This is all by default. But the real power comes when you connect it to Google BigQuery, which is a data warehouse, and now the fun begins.
So before we hop to that, let's talk about the pluses and maybe the cons of a spreadsheet. So yeah, a spreadsheet is universal, right? So I can, I'm sure, go into my CRM or go into a marketing automation tool, and I can go and export all the data that it has, and it's in a spreadsheet format, and I can have that in Google Sheets, and then I can connect Data Studio to that.
Yeah.
What are the drawbacks of doing that? If I just want to keep it on Google Sheets that I had exported from another tool.
Yeah. Well, to keep it simple, I would say the biggest drawback, like there's many drawbacks, but the main one is really the amount of data that Google Sheets can process. Right now, I think they increased recently how many cells a Google Sheets can handle. I think it's 5 million. But
it's finite.
Yeah, it is, and they say 5 millions, but if you get there, it's gonna be really slow, and it's not a solution that can scale.
So good point, because some people might just say, I've already got it in Google Sheets, and I know that Google Sheets does a chart. Why don't I just make a chart about it? Well, they're going to hit what you are describing. It's going to slow to a crawl after a while, because it has to do so many calculations to get there.
Yeah, and 5 millions might seem like a lot, but it's really not.
Well, so let's talk about what you normally do and what you start to become handcuffed to if you use a spreadsheet. Is I talked about going and getting the data. Well, that was maybe up until the end of last month. But at the end of this month, I have to go do that again. I got to find the bottom row, and I got to append, the new data.
Yeah,
like you said, it'll grow and get slower and slower because of that.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, there's workaround for that. If you don't want to do it manually, you can either like build a Google app script if you want to do that, or use a software like Zapier, for example. But Zapier charge you for every Zaps that you're gonna, and it goes fast. Like, if your plan is to do that, be ready to pay like $3,000-$4,000 a month for Zapier, just not to have to do it manually, which is insane.
Right. But then again, having a programmer who writes app script, that isn't cheap either. So let's talk about what is, so we've kind of debunked the spreadsheets, right? Can be slow, can be expensive. And you are, if you're using a third-party tool, you're paying for every piece of data flowing along a pipe. And over on the other side, there is a simpler option that doesn't really require any coding. So you mentioned BigQuery. So tell us about that.
Well, Google BigQuery is obviously a Google product, which is pretty much free unless you're using you're processing a lot of data. They also give you, I think, a $400 credit.
It's 300 or 400, but yes, you will. It's very unlikely you'll see a bill anytime soon because you're nowhere close to the cap.
And so that's really nice. It is much faster than Google Sheets. It is a proper data warehouse. Google Sheets is a spreadsheet. Those things are different. And it also connects natively to Google Data Studio. So once you connect that, you'll see this powered by BigQuery, and your dashboard is going to be much faster. And it might not seem like a lot, but speed is what's going to make you use that dashboard. Slow dashboard don't get used, and then you just have a bunch of data that's not leveraged. So speed is really important, even though it might not be obvious.
Right. So, and while we're on this, for anybody who this is fairly new to, let's just kind of describe the roles here, because there is something that spreadsheets do all in one, right? We've said that they, get us all the way to a chart if we want. But if we're going to try and use a data source that we bring into BigQuery, plus it needs to get over to Data Studio, we have to now start thinking of these as being jobs, right? And each one of those applications has a job. Yeah. So the job that BigQuery does incredibly well is it handles knowing that your outside data source is going to drop new information. And you could, there are relatively inexpensive tools that will allow you to schedule that work and have that flow in every day if you want, every hour if you want. As you say, Data Studio can bring all that information over for visualizing it. But there's this piece that we haven't talked about that we're used to doing over in spreadsheets, which is cleaning up the data a little bit, a little bit of manipulation, or maybe we have to divide one number by another number and have a column for that. I know that there are some things that can be done on the Data Studio side, but when we get a little bit more fancy, we have to, if we're using a database, we have to use something that is different than what we would use if we were in a spreadsheet. We can't just add formulas. We have to use a language, right? So what is the language that we've got to use in BigQuery if we need to do any of that stuff?
Yeah, most databases use SQL or SQL, that's called.
What is that?
It's a programming language that's really just for a database, and it's really simple. If you are an advanced Google Sheets user, you probably already came across some SQL already. When you type equal query, basically that's SQL that you're going to type in there, and it's very literal. So when you do you want
it's like a sentence, right?
Yeah, basically.
Tell me all the rows from here where this is such.
Yeah. So where date is that and amount is that, for example, and it's gonna just return the results in the console in BigQuery, which is pretty handy.
Right. And then if you point, instead of just pointing Data Studio to the raw table that's growing all the time, if you did want to, do something special with your dates, maybe you need to follow them according to what your company's fiscal year is or whatever it is, you would tell Data Studio, go get it from that SQL query because you've already done some things and the data is more refined. For Data Studio, and Data Studio will just make it look pretty.
Yeah, exactly. So there's two ways to go about it. There's one where you can directly use queries inside Data Studio to send to BigQuery. Or another way, which is what we normally do, is we build a transform table. So we get all the raw data into BigQuery, and then this stays there. This is what gets updated directly from the source. But then we transform that data for our needs. So we change the date format if we need to. We use the amount from one data source and the other information from other data source to create one final table that will contain more insightful information, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think any marketer listening to this recognizes what you're saying when they think about if they have a board meeting or their senior management team says how many of the different marketing advertising that we were doing, how many of those advertising channels were turning into closed deals where we won new clients, right? Well, to do that, you got to go get information from the ads, and you have to go get information from sales, and you have to put them together.
Yeah, exactly. There's there's a ton of example I could think of where marketing would benefit from that. Most of the time it's with attribution. It's much simpler when you can store the data somewhere and you don't just rely on cookies. Just mixing data from multiple platforms like Facebook ads, Google ads,
right,
to get your return on ad spend overall, and then be able to kind of drill down per platform in a single place.
Or as you alluded to there, sometimes we're filling in gaps where the platforms no longer can show us stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So there's multiple use to do that. And honestly, there's a reason also you said that each platform has its own role. I think there's a reason why GA4 has such a bad UI. I think the reason is that they don't care. I mean, they built it in a way because GA4 integrates with BigQuery natively now.
Right.
And Data Studio is also free.
Right.
So there's no actual need to have a decent reporting in GA4 now because they have Data Studio and they want people to use Data Studio. So I wouldn't be surprised if it would be by design, actually, that.
Yes, or if we want to be a little cynical, while they will probably leave Data Studio as free, the cloud platform that BigQuery is sitting on, if you do put enough of your data in there, you will start to have to pay Google.
Yeah, so I think that's the end goal there. But honestly, it's fair game because it provides so much value that
if we, I mean, let's think of it in unit economics. If we think of how much it would cost us to buy our own servers, stack them in the closet, put our information on them, and pay for the hard drives, versus Google, who probably has the lowest operating cost per gigabyte of any company on the planet, right? They will be very competitively priced with any option that we would build it ourselves.
Yeah, and security as well. Like they handle that,
right? And you and I don't work for Google. We're not, there's no sponsored ad here. It's just it's a reality.
I gotta give them some love. I mean, I run my whole business on the Google ecosystem, and honestly, adoption has been so easy when we needed to start using a new software or just getting new client. Everyone runs on Google or Microsoft, but
and you need that, right? You can't have a fragmented industry. If you at least can say to people, this is a tool, you will learn how to use it quite quickly, or you probably already know it. If it's one of the main tools that are out there,
when it's a big one,
everything goes better.
I don't know if like ETLs are a thing. Like ETLs are the software that allows you to connect different platform that might be outside of the Google ecosystem to your Google BigQuery database.
Yep.
Nowadays, ETLs, there's tons of them, and they all connect natively, again, to Google BigQuery. If you were to have your own server and your own database, connecting Facebook ads to that might be a bit more complicated than just
So yes, and I've got an episode I'll put in the show notes on ETL. So yeah, we're just talking about at a hardware level. We're saying that you should, use a cloud provider. There are a few out there, but Google, like you've said, Eric, it's natively integrated already, and it's all there. Especially for GA, if people had tried to get the previous version of GA on Google Cloud Platform, Google needed them to be on the premium package, which is tens of thousands of dollars a month. So this is a very attractive option, which people should look for. And we're recording this in April of 2022, having just found out that GA4 is now the only analytics version that's going to be around, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. So the one last thing I wanted to kind of return to, you had mentioned that Data Studio, and databases can do this, but Data Studio is no code. You can just drag and drop. But in Data Studio, if I want to bring two data sources together, so they call that blending. What actually am I doing if I'm trying to, like I said, take the ads that are showing me maybe the clicks that I had for each day on my site, and then I've got this other platform that shows, the conversions that I got through and whether they became a sale or not. What do I have to do to blend them?
Actually, it's incredibly simple in Data Studio to do that. So let's just imagine that you have connected to both data source already. So you have your you already connected Data Studio to Google Ads, for example, and you already connected to, let's say, Google Analytics, and you'd like to know your conversion rates for page views to the conversions that Google Ads return and not what you see in GA. So you need to blend the data for both data source. It would be as simple as selecting both page views and conversion and the number of conversion you got, and just right-clicking and blending the data. So what happens is that they're going to combine those two tables.
Right.
We can imagine the data lives in two tables. So you would be imagine two tables where the data is date and page views, and the other one is date and conversions. Then they would blend together, and you would be able to run calculation. And in that case, it would be the conversion rate that you're trying to calculate.
So it's using date to join the two of them.
Yeah, exactly. And recently,
so there has to be something common in both of them, right?
Yeah, well, actually, this was a limitation of Data Studio for a while, and it was really painful. But recently, we had an update, and we got multiple type of join in Data Studio. So now you don't even have to have a join value between the two. You can just blend two completely different table now, and it's going to work. So that has been a very important update because this was really needed.
Absolutely. So we've got a good way to pull data together and to visualize it. Data Studio has just about every chart that you could want to make in any other package, so you're not limited that way. But now we've got, I guess, another job that we have to do, and that is that each of us, if we're using someone like you, or even if we're working on this on our own, we have to start thinking about how the person receiving this visual information, how they think and what they're trying to accomplish, right? I know that you put a lot of bother into how data is represented. And in the past, you've used the word story, right, with me when you've described how you do it. So what do you mean by that? How are you trying to tell a story? And, tell us a bit about how you go about doing that.
It's an interesting process because every business owner is slightly different. So you know that you're going to have to show the data in a different way to different business owners.
Right.
Some are really interested in like the nitty gritty. They want to dig really deep in the data, and some just like to have an overview. So you have to keep that in mind, their level of sophistication in what you present. And assuming you already follow like best practice in the visualization of the data, like pie chart normally are not very good unless it totals 100%.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Like there's some small things that you kind of need to know, but a quick Google search will most likely help you out with this. But the thing is really to put yourself in the shoes of the business owners, not succumb to the pressure of just getting more data point and more, because you're going to get that. Like they will be interested in knowing a lot of stuff. But the question should always be, if we had the answer to that today,
right, what would we do?
What would we do? And if it's not clear, we got to ask better questions. We just got to ask better questions and until we're clear on what would be the next step and how is it going to bring value, because it's easy to get lost in the data.
Yeah. And so there are some things we do know, right? We know, for example, every company exists to make money. So we can start to understand if someone wants to say, what is the distribution of these things? Or what is the relationship between if I do this and does that happen? If we start to think of there being dollars, and we usually can, bring dollars along from some of these systems into it, we can then use a chart that will hopefully answer that question, about how this is leading to them making money. Like that's at least somewhere to start, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one thing with data pipelines, what I mean by data pipelines is multiple data source working together to create like better insights. The good thing is before, most likely you were looking at your Facebook ads data in Facebook, Google ads data, and everything is kind of in a vacuum.
Yes.
Right? It's just like in a silo. You just look at this and so
you're seeing what they want you to see.
Not only, you would only see what they want you to see, but also it would be so easy to have, but there's those other factors that this platform doesn't take into account.
Right.
Yeah, okay, I have this, but so if you are not too interested in following exactly the data, you have a good excuse not to when you're doing that. But once you start blending data for all of your business, your sales department, your even HR, production, anything, like it becomes much easier to have a clear answer from your data, and it's harder to kind of ignore that once you have those clear answers. You cannot say that like you used to, but this doesn't, now it does, right? You have the full picture.
Yeah, and marketing is basically joining the rest of a company, who has been used to using dollars as the common denominator, right? So now marketing can actually be a full-fledged, teammate there and speak in the same language.
Yeah, exactly.
But this data can even go beyond that. So you've had the good fortune of working on some projects where not only have you been able to kind of tell people what they have right now and you can visualize it, but you take it a step further to show them maybe what could be, or
Yeah.
to give them maybe just a different angle, like we've actually swiveled around and we've looked at things in a way that we've never seen them before. Tell me a little bit about what's possible there.
There's a lot of things, and I don't want to confuse people with like data scientist term, like with AI, machine learning, and all that stuff, like, because this is not what this is about, right?
No, you can go there, but you don't have to just for
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want anyone to think that this is just for big company. It's not. So what's possible? I mean, yeah, forecasting is a big one. I mean, if you have enough data to forecast in the future, see your numbers, how they went up last year, or even prepare your production based on Google Trends search results. You have seen that those at this time of the year search for that increase, and this match pretty much what you're selling. So you should probably prepare for that. And this is only possible when you start to integrate even third-party data sets into your own data. So there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do.
That's right. And when it comes to our own clients, stepping beyond just serving our internal reporting, things like Data Studio can even bring out data that some of those clients may want. You mentioned about forecasting. Well, if we're in any business where there's an element of supply chain, we're not only the consumers of information, like you said, Google Trends and Google Keyword Planner and Google Trends. I can click a button and it can tell me what it forecasts out, for their, and that's their product. But we probably have some of that inside of our own companies too. And what we need to start thinking is when you can connect all of these different sources, maybe our own clients would want some of that information, and they may even consider it important enough that they would pay a premium to get it.
Yeah, totally. It's some people say that tattoos, when you get started, you cannot stop, and there's a bunch of things like that. But I'm telling you, dashboards are kind of the same thing, because business owners, once they finally see a clear picture of what's going on, I'm telling you that the questions now starts to pop, and now it's a matter of choosing the right one. But it's a great way to keep servicing your client over and over. I'm still surprised that I'm still working with client I began with. At first, they were just interested into a simple dashboard, but it grew into now I'm tracking their call centers,
right?
The average time on call, how long it take, how many calls they're missing, and how does that impact their bottom line? And it's crazy.
Because they are using it for decision-making intelligence. The information that you have for them, don't limit yourself to thinking, oh, well, we're the only ones who care about this. They may, and there's kind of a simple level, and there's maybe a more complex level of this. At the simple level, if you wanted to make this available to clients, there are some nice filters inside of Data Studio. So you can say, okay, I just want, my own area, or I want to look at this region, and if you have something like state or province, then that's just a drop down, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you can take it beyond that. Data Studio, if I'm right, has also ways of either sending out PDFs to people or giving them a secure way of accessing their own data via like a Google account, right? A login.
Yeah, exactly. You can share, like you would share a Google Sheet. So you share edit access or view access to an email address. There's other ways. If your clients, for example, are not in the Google ecosystem, now you can embed the dashboard into a web page with credentials, right? Username, password, you log in, and then you can interact it in the dashboard, even if you're outside of the Google ecosystem. Well, the person creating it has to use Google, but the one using it doesn't have to anymore.
Right. Yeah, they've made it, quite extensive. And if we think about some of the modern websites and apps that we use, they're not actually as complex as some people might think. You and I were talking just before we started recording about some of the things that are using an ecosystem like this and public data feeds. By the way, neglected to mention, Data Studio has a ton of public data connectors that you just need to turn on. So, like, what examples come to your mind about ways that taking individual data and then blending it with public data, where can you go with that? And are there some things that, people may recognize that they already use that are nothing more than that?
Well, we were discussing that earlier. I think Google Map is pretty cool because it's kind of a blend of both, but like the traffic, like knowing that there's going to be traffic, this is just data from already users that are on the road and they're stuck, and it goes back to Google, and then you see that on your phone, but it's just the person in front of you sharing that data that they are stuck in traffic, and they just relay that information to you, and now you can take a better decision and take another route.
And if you think like the filter that Google is using is who is heading in the same direction on this road, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's all they have to know to realize that, those individual data points collectively have value.
Yeah, or Netflix recommendations are based on your own data, but also people that have a similar profile to you, what they are watching and enjoying, they're going to recommend that to you. So it's, again, other people's data that is being used to better serve you.
And these are big examples, but think about it in different categories. For anybody who's into fitness, right? This is the same thing that would appear on your watch or your Fitband that reports, and maybe if you have a challenge, right? Who are you beating this week? It's the same general idea. Personal finance. I know in the States, Mint is pretty popular, and it's there's a few of them. There's ones that do the banking stuff, but there's also ones, for example, that help with your credit score. Well, credit scores are available by a connector because companies need to go and check and see if someone has credit before they let them buy something. Well, that credit score information, in the blink of an eye, comes back into a database. And if you can find out how you are doing around people of the same age or who live in the same area, it's motivation to you. There's just so many.
It just helps you to take better decisions because we're really bad. We're really bad at making good decisions, and especially when it comes to us. For example, the best way to know if you're going to enjoy a job in the future, for example.
That's a good one.
Not to use yourself as an example and project yourself in the future, like, how am I going to enjoy that? The best way is probably to go ahead and ask people doing that job if they do enjoy it. And if you ask enough people, I think it's a better predictor of how you're going to like it.
And there are websites that have taken that information, right? I've seen other ones where and it's not the nicest term, but sometimes you will hear the word scrape, right? So what they're doing is they're scraping, for example, jobs off of job boards. And these services are just amalgamating them, and then letting you filter according to what your skills are, right?
Yeah.
It's when people hear this, you can't help but see it everywhere you look.
Yeah, and it's like it doesn't have to be super complex. I have a client who's making about like 500. He's a coach, a
Yes.
fitness coach. He's making about $500,000 a month with his YouTube channel, and so he's doing really well.
Yeah.
And recently started working with us, and I thought about that because you talked about Mint. So he's tracking all of his finance using Mint. So what we did is we plugged that data into Data Studio and start to kind of do charts and just analyze the data. And we found about $40,000 a month that could just be saved. So we saved this guy about $500,000 a year just by looking at the data. So you don't have to get fancy. Data is valuable at any point in time, honestly.
Yeah. And this extends if you take an example like that where it's banking information. It's not a stretch to think that you can hand someone a Data Studio instance, and yes, you're probably sharing information that you have. Maybe it's some activity information, but if they wanted to plug it against, for example, their own banking numbers, let's say you're in the coaching business of helping them grow their wealth.
Yeah.
This is where, with one authentication, they can go ahead and put their own information in. And now the Data Studio report is blending maybe these overall numbers with their own individual numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Even like a simple example like Google Ads, for example. The structure of the data stays same from account to account. It's Google Ads won't change its structure for any new account created. So
Right.
Once you have a Google Ads dashboard that you're really happy with it, then you can connect any Google Ads account to that dashboard. So the value for your client, it's really easy to templatize and kind of reuse the work you've done. So,
yeah. And I suppose that is one of the last bits of a mind shift that needs to happen. I love that term, templatize, where you have to think about how you're going to set this up once, but you're going to deploy it in many places.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to think of it a little bit as a product. And I guess we had said that we wanted to finish with the thought that if you are taking data and it has value, well, what is something common that has value? A product, right? And if data is maybe, and it's not just the raw data now, it's all refined and well presented, and it's actionable, it's something that has clarity, right? This is now something that if we change our mindset from thinking that our company is in the widget building business, maybe we still sell widgets, but maybe we're also in the actionable data business.
Yeah, that's the cool part of it, because like it used to be so complex that you had to spend so much time building a solution.
To make a factory.
Yeah, and so getting insight was kind of the last, like data scientists were so busy building stuff.
Yes.
But now that it's easier and we can templatize and we can spend more time just getting better insight from the data. And that's a good place. That's where you want to be. You don't want to fight against the technology. You just want to get good answers.
Yeah. And, as you've shown, it's a journey, right? You get good answers, but those will bring up new questions and they'll get to even better answers, right? So we must be prepared to think of this as something that we're going to do in an ongoing way. Just like you've taken your clients, and you are a lot way further than, you began with them. But, right. But it's a process. And we, at least in the time series data world, that's great because we can kind of look at what we did over a month to month or a quarter to quarter, and we can start to say, okay, that's great, but let's change it for the next one.
Yeah, you can. Like, you don't have to start big. That's another cool thing about it. Like it doesn't have to be huge to be worth it.
Don't
like,
get overwhelmed.
Start simple. I started with Google Sheets connected to Data Studio, and now we're doing pretty cool stuff with BigQuery and even sending our data outside to build other application. So that's, but yeah, start small and you'll see the value really quick.
Eric, if people want to find out more about you and about Systematik, where can they go?
They can find me on my website and or on LinkedIn, Eric Boissonneault. I guess my name is going to be written in the show description.
Yes.
If not, they can find me on Systematik with a K.ca.
That's wonderful. Thanks again for coming on the show, Eric.
Thanks to you, Glenn.
And to the listener, I hope you've gotten some value. I hope it's expanded your thinking on really what business we're in, and that you as a marketer who are charged with helping your company look for ways to grow the business have already thought of something that you can help using data to maybe grow or maybe even overhaul the type of business that you're in. Anything's possible in this age, and it's great to have people like Eric who can help show us the way. So I hope you've come away with something that helps you make your
Thanks for
funnel
listening.
even better.
Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.